The night my ex-husband realized he had lost everything, I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was looking at the life I had built without him. Crystal chandeliers scattered golden light across the grand ballroom of the Whitmore Foundation Gala, painting the marble floor in reflections that looked almost like stars. The room buzzed with quiet power. CEOs, investors, politicians, people whose names appeared on magazine covers and business networks every week. Yet none of them held Ethan Caldwell's attention. Not tonight. Standing near the center of the ballroom in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, Ethan had spent the last 15 minutes pretending to listen to conversations he could barely hear. At 44, he was still considered one of the most influential real estate developers in America. His company had expanded across 12 states. Financial publications praised his discipline, his vision, his relentless work ethic. To everyone around him, he looked exactly the same as he always had. Confident, successful, untouchable. But appearances had become dangerous things. Because sometimes a man could build an empire and still discover there was an emptiness no amount of money could fill. The orchestra shifted into a softer melody as another wave of guests entered through the ballroom's towering double doors. Ethan glanced toward the entrance without thinking. Then his entire body froze. The woman stepping into the room wore a crimson gown that moved like liquid silk beneath the chandeliers. Elegant, timeless, effortlessly graceful. Her dark skin glowed beneath the warm lights. Her posture carried the kind of confidence that couldn't be purchased or borrowed. It had to be earned. Conversations seemed to fade into the background. The ballroom disappeared. 5 years vanished in a single heartbeat. Amara Bennett, his ex-wife, the woman he hadn't seen since the morning she walked out of his life. The woman he had spent 5 years trying and failing to forget. Ethan felt something tighten painfully inside his chest. She looked different yet exactly the same. The kindness that had always lived in her eyes remained untouched. But now there was something else. Strength. The kind forged through storms no one else witnessed. The kind that came from surviving disappointment and refusing to let it define you. Around her people smiled. Important people. Powerful people. They greeted her warmly. Some even seemed honored by her presence. Ethan watched as the chairman of the foundation personally approached her, shaking her hand with obvious respect. His confusion deepened. 5 years ago, Amara had left with little more than a suitcase and her dignity. Now the entire room seemed to know her name. "That's Amara Bennett," a voice beside him said. Ethan turned toward two investors speaking nearby. Neither noticed he was listening. "The interior design visionary?" one asked. "The same one. Her company just landed the largest luxury hospitality contract on the East Coast. Forbes featured her last month." Ethan stared back at Amara as the words echoed through his mind. Forbes. National recognition. Industry leadership. Success on a scale he had never imagined. A strange mixture of pride and regret settled over him. Once upon a time, he had been the person who encouraged her dreams. Once upon a time, she had believed in him more than anyone else ever had. Then came the anniversary dinner. The words. The silence afterward. The moment everything broke. As if sensing his gaze, Amara slowly turned her head. Their eyes met across the ballroom. 5 years of distance collapsed into a single breath. Ethan expected anger, resentment, maybe even bitterness. Instead, she offered a calm, polite smile. The kind you give a stranger. The kind that carried no hatred because hatred required emotional investment. Then she looked away. Just like that. As though the man who once held her heart no longer occupied any meaningful space in her world. And for the first time in 5 years, Ethan Caldwell understood something that success had never taught him. Losing someone wasn't always the moment they left. Sometimes the real loss happened years later, when you finally realized they had learned how to live beautifully without you. 5 years earlier, the city had glowed with the same golden lights, but Amara Bennett had seen them very differently. That evening, every reflection in the penthouse windows looked like a promise. Every candle seemed to carry a memory. Every detail had been chosen with love. The dining room overlooking downtown Chicago shimmered beneath soft crystal light. A white linen tablecloth stretched across the long table. Fresh roses rested in a silver vase. 2 champagne glasses waited beside a small anniversary cake, decorated with the number 10 in elegant gold script. 10 years. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of believing they were building something unbreakable. Amara adjusted the sleeve of her navy blue dress and glanced at the clock again. 7:32. Ethan was late. Not unusual lately. His company had grown rapidly over the previous 3 years. Investors demanded more. Clients demanded more. The world seemed determined to take pieces of him every day. Amara understood that. She always had. She picked up a framed photograph from the sideboard. Their wedding day. Ethan looked younger then. Less guarded. Less exhausted. Back when success had been a dream instead of a burden. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the frame. A smile touched her lips. In the kitchen, a special envelope remained hidden inside a drawer. She had spent months preparing what was inside. Months imagining his reaction. Tonight was supposed to change everything. The sound of the elevator finally echoed through the penthouse. Relief filled her chest. She quickly placed the photograph back and straightened her posture. Moments later, Ethan stepped inside. His charcoal suit looked expensive as always. His tie hung slightly loose. His shoulders carried the weight of another endless day. Yet something felt different. Colder. Distant. Amara crossed the room with a warm smile. Happy anniversary. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek. Ethan forced a small smile. Happy anniversary. His voice sounded distracted. Tired. He barely glanced at the table she had spent all day preparing. Amara ignored the disappointment creeping into her heart. I ordered your favorite dinner from Lakeview Grill. They even recreated the dessert from our first date. Ethan loosened his tie and walked toward the window. You did not have to do all this. The words were polite, but they felt strangely empty. Silence settled between them. Outside, thousands of lights sparkled against the dark sky. Inside, the distance felt larger than the entire city. Amara studied her husband carefully. Ethan, is everything okay? He did not answer immediately. His reflection stared back from the glass. A successful man. A respected man. A man who had everything people spent their lives chasing. Yet somehow he looked unhappy. Finally he exhaled. Long and slow. Do you ever wonder what your life would have looked like if you had made different choices? Amara frowned. Sometimes. I think everyone does. Another silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then Ethan laughed softly, but there was no joy in the sound. I do. He turned toward her. For a brief second, she did not recognize the expression in his eyes. It was not anger. It was not cruelty. It was something worse. Regret. Ethan, she whispered. He looked at the anniversary cake. The flowers. The photographs. The symbols of a marriage she had spent 10 years protecting. Then he spoke the words that would divide her life into before and after. Sometimes, he said quietly, I wish you were not my wife. The candles continued to burn. The city continued to shine. Somewhere below, traffic moved through the streets as if nothing had changed. But inside Amara Bennett's heart, an entire world had just fallen silent. For a moment, Amara thought she had misunderstood him. The words hung in the air between them, almost gentle in their delivery, which somehow made them hurt even more. She stood motionless beside the anniversary table, her fingers resting lightly against the back of a dining chair. Across the room, Ethan looked away first. Not because he regretted what he had said, but because he seemed relieved to have finally spoken it aloud. The realization settled heavily inside her chest. This was not a careless comment. It was not frustration after a difficult day. This was a truth he had been carrying for a long time. The candles flickered softly. The roses remained perfect. The cake sat untouched beneath the warm glow of the chandelier. Every symbol of love suddenly felt like evidence from a life that no longer existed. Amara swallowed carefully. Her voice when it came was calm. Do you mean that? Ethan rubbed a hand across his jaw. His reflection drifted across the dark windows behind him. I do not know anymore. The answer struck harder than anger ever could. Because uncertainty meant he had already left the marriage in his heart. He simply had not left physically. Amara lowered her eyes. 10 years of memories moved through her mind like photographs scattered by the wind. Their first apartment. The nights they survived on takeout food and impossible dreams. The excitement of Ethan's first major business contract. The mornings they drank coffee on the balcony and planned their future. She had believed every sacrifice was building something permanent. Now she wondered whether she had been building alone. Ethan walked toward the table and stared at the anniversary cake. Things changed, Amara. People change, she replied quietly. Not promises. A bitter smile touched his face. You always had a way of making everything sound simple. No. I just believed marriage was supposed to mean something. Silence answered her. Somewhere below the penthouse, a siren echoed through the city streets before fading into the distance. Amara noticed how tired Ethan looked. Not physically, spiritually, as though success had given him everything except peace. When did it start? She asked. When did you stop wanting this life? Ethan hesitated. Maybe when I realized everyone around me expected something different. The words revealed more than he intended. Amara finally understood. The board members, the investors, the exclusive social circles, the endless charity galas filled with people born into privilege. For years she had sensed their quiet judgment. She had simply trusted Ethan to value her more than their opinions. So this is about appearances? She asked softly. Ethan looked down. That was answer enough. A strange calm settled over her. The pain remained, but beneath it came clarity. She could not compete with expectations she never created. She could not spend the rest of her life convincing someone of her worth. The woman who had loved Ethan for 10 years deserved more than that. Without another word, Amara walked toward the kitchen. Ethan watched her go. Inside the drawer, she found the envelope she had hidden months earlier. Her hands lingered on it for a long moment. All the dreams attached to it suddenly felt fragile. She closed the drawer again without taking it out. Not tonight. Not anymore. When she returned to the dining room, the candles were still burning. But something essential had already gone dark. And for the first time since the conversation began, Amara was no longer thinking about how to save her marriage. She was beginning to wonder how to save herself. Amara barely slept that night. The city lights remained visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows long after midnight, glowing against the darkness like distant reminders that life continued whether hearts broke or not. Ethan eventually retreated to his home office. She heard the door close softly. Neither of them attempted another conversation. There was nothing left to explain. Some truths changed everything the moment they were spoken. Just before sunrise, pale light began spilling across the Chicago skyline. The penthouse looked different in the early morning quiet. Less like a home, more like a museum filled with memories that belonged to another version of her life. Amara stood alone in the kitchen holding a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The envelope remained inside the drawer where she had hidden it. The surprise she had planned for their anniversary. The future she thought they were about to begin together. Slowly, she opened the drawer and removed it. Her fingers traced the edges carefully. Inside were documents from an adoption agency. Nearly 18 months of interviews, evaluations, paperwork, and waiting lists had finally led to approval. She had imagined Ethan opening the envelope with tears in his eyes. She had imagined celebrating together. She had imagined introducing a child into a home filled with love. Now the dream felt impossibly far away. A single tear escaped before she quickly wiped it away. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Not because she was happy, because for the first time in years the future belonged entirely to her. By 7 o'clock, she had made her decision. She walked through the penthouse one final time. The living room where they hosted holiday parties. The balcony where they watched summer fireworks. The hallway lined with photographs documenting a decade of shared milestones. Every room carried echoes of a marriage she had protected with loyalty, patience, and hope. Yet she felt strangely calm. Some endings arrived like storms. Others arrived like silence. Amara packed one suitcase. Nothing more. Few clothes. Personal documents. Her sketchbooks. The framed photograph from their wedding day. She left behind the expensive jewelry. The designer handbags. The luxury that had accumulated around them over the years. None of it mattered. Her worth had never lived inside those things. As she zipped the suitcase closed, Ethan finally emerged from his office. He stopped when he saw it sitting beside the door. Surprise flashed across his face. "What are you doing?" he asked. Amara looked at him steadily. Leaving. The single word seemed to catch him off guard. Perhaps he had expected tears, arguments, negotiation. Instead he found certainty. Ethan glanced at the suitcase. You are serious? Yes. He ran a hand through his hair. For the first time since the previous evening, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Maybe we should take some time before making decisions. Amara almost laughed at the irony. 10 years she had fought for their marriage. Now that she was finally letting go, he wanted more time. You already made the decision, she said quietly. You just did not realize it. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. No defense came. No explanation. Deep down he knew she was right. Amara reached into her purse and removed her wedding ring. The gold caught the morning sunlight as she placed it gently on the entryway table. Beside it, she left the adoption envelope. Ethan frowned. What is that? For a moment she considered telling him. Then she shook her head. Some truths needed to arrive on their own. Goodbye, Ethan. She lifted her suitcase and walked toward the elevator. Behind her, the penthouse remained perfectly quiet. Ahead of her, uncertainty waited. But as the elevator doors closed, one thing became clear. She was not walking away from her life. She was walking toward it. The first year after leaving felt nothing like freedom. It felt like learning how to breathe again. Amara rented a small one-bedroom apartment on the north side of the city, barely 700 square feet, with aging hardwood floors and windows that overlooked a parking lot instead of a skyline. Yet every morning when sunlight slipped through those windows, she felt something she had not experienced in a long time. Peace. There were no expectations waiting for her there. No social circles to impress. No pressure to become someone else. Just a quiet space where she could hear her own thoughts again. The divorce became official 6 months later. Surprisingly, the process remained respectful. Ethan did not fight her. He did not ask her to return. He signed every document and disappeared back into the world that had always demanded more from him. Amara accepted no unnecessary settlements beyond what was legally fair. Many people thought she was making a mistake. Friends encouraged her to take advantage of the wealth she had helped build. But she wanted something more valuable than money. She wanted ownership of her future. During the day, she worked as a freelance interior designer. At night, she sketched ideas at her small kitchen table. Restaurants, boutique hotels, luxury residential spaces. Entire worlds she imagined creating from nothing more than light, texture, and emotion. Some months were difficult. There were weeks when invoices arrived late and savings disappeared faster than expected. She learned how to stretch every dollar. She learned how to trust herself. Most importantly, she learned that confidence was not something another person could give you. It had to be built from the inside. One rainy afternoon, nearly a year after leaving the penthouse, an unexpected email appeared in her inbox. A boutique hotel owner in Milwaukee had seen photographs of one of her small renovation projects online. He wanted her to redesign an entire property. The budget was modest. The timeline was aggressive. The opportunity was enormous. Amara accepted immediately. For the next 4 months she poured everything into the project. Long days became longer nights. Coffee cups covered her desk. Fabric samples filled her apartment. Sketches covered nearly every available surface. When the hotel finally opened, the response exceeded everyone's expectations. Travel magazines praised its warmth. Guests posted photographs across social media. Reservations sold out weeks in advance. Suddenly more inquiries arrived. Then more. Then even more. 2 years after walking away from her marriage, Amara officially launched Bennett Design Studio. The company began with 3 employees working from a converted warehouse space. By the end of the 3rd year, the team had grown to 20. By the 4th year, they were designing luxury properties across multiple states. Success arrived gradually, then all at once. Yet the achievement she valued most had nothing to do with awards or contracts. One spring morning, after years of waiting and persistence, she completed the adoption process she had once planned to share with Ethan. Sitting inside a family services office, she met a 6-year-old girl named Lily. Bright eyes, curious smile, quiet courage. Something clicked instantly between them. Not destiny, not magic. Something deeper. recognition. As Amara held Lily's small hand for the first time, she realized life had not fallen apart 5 years earlier. It had simply changed direction. The dream she once mourned had transformed into something she never could have imagined. And for the first time in a very long time, the future looked brighter than the past. By the 5th year, Bennett Design Studio had become something few people could have predicted. What began at a kitchen table surrounded by unpaid invoices and sketches had evolved into one of the most respected luxury design firms in the country. The company occupied 3 floors of a restored historic building in downtown Chicago. Architectural magazines featured Amara's work regularly. Hospitality executives competed for her attention. Industry conferences invited her to speak about creativity, leadership, and resilience. Yet the achievement she valued most remained remarkably simple. Every afternoon at 4 o'clock, no matter how busy her schedule became, she reserved time for Lily. Sometimes they shared ice cream after school. Sometimes they worked on homework together. Sometimes they simply sat on the living room floor and laughed about things that seemed insignificant to everyone else. Those moments mattered more than any business award ever could. One bright spring morning, Amara arrived at her office carrying a cup of coffee and a folder filled with plans for a new luxury resort project in California. The reception area buzzed with activity. Phones rang. Designers moved between meetings. Large screens displayed renderings for projects stretching across multiple states. The energy reminded her how far they had come. As she stepped into her office, her executive assistant, Rachel Morgan, followed closely behind. Rachel carried a small stack of correspondence and wore an unusually excited expression. "You are going to want to see this," she said. Amara smiled. "That usually means trouble or opportunity." "Definitely opportunity." Rachel handed her a cream-colored envelope embossed with gold lettering. The Whitmore Foundation, one of the most influential philanthropic organizations in the country. Amara opened the invitation carefully. Her eyes moved across the elegant script. She had been selected as one of the foundation's honored guests at its annual gala. More importantly, she was being recognized for her contributions to community redevelopment and family-centered design initiatives. For a moment, she simply stared at the page. 5 years earlier, she had walked away from a life that seemed certain. Now she was being invited into rooms she had never imagined entering on her own terms. Rachel grinned. "This is a big deal." "Yes," Amara replied softly. "It is." That evening after dinner, Lily sat cross-legged on the living room rug while Amara reviewed the invitation again. The house around them felt warm and peaceful. Family photographs lined the shelves. Fresh flowers brightened the dining table. It was not the largest home she had ever lived in, but it was unquestionably her favorite. Lily looked up from her coloring book. "What are you smiling about?" Amara laughed. "I did not realize I was smiling." "You are." Lily pointed dramatically. "Right now." Amara folded the invitation. "I have an event next month." "A fancy one?" "Very fancy." Lily nodded seriously. "Then you should wear the red dress." Amara froze for a fraction of a second. The red dress. The same crimson gown hanging untouched in her closet. The one she had purchased years ago but never found a reason to wear. A symbol from another chapter of her life. She glanced toward the hallway where the garment remained carefully protected inside a garment bag. Perhaps Lily was right. Perhaps some things did not belong to the past forever. Perhaps they waited patiently until you became strong enough to wear them again. And thousands of miles away, completely unaware of the invitation that had just arrived, Ethan Caldwell was about to discover that the woman he once underestimated had become impossible to ignore. The week before the gala, Ethan Caldwell received a magazine he normally would have ignored. It sat untouched on the corner of his desk for nearly 2 days while meetings consumed every hour of his schedule. Market reports, acquisition negotiations, investor presentations. The familiar rhythm of success continued exactly as it always had. Yet lately success felt strangely quiet. On Thursday evening, after most of the staff had gone home, Ethan finally picked up the publication while waiting for a conference call. The cover featured a luxury coastal resort, unlike anything he had seen before. Elegant, warm, sophisticated without feeling cold. He studied the design for a moment, impressed despite himself. Then he noticed the headline beneath the photograph. Bennett Design Studio redefines modern hospitality. Ethan's stomach tightened instantly. He stared at the name. Bennett. The conference call notification appeared on his computer screen, but he ignored it. Slowly, he opened the article. Page after page showcased projects created by Amara and her team. Hotels, residential developments, community revitalization projects, interviews with industry leaders praising her vision, photographs capturing confident smiles he had not seen in years. There she was, standing in front of a completed project, looking strong, successful, and entirely at peace. Ethan read every word. Then he read it again. Somewhere between the second and third page, a painful realization settled over him. Amara had become everything she was always capable of becoming. The difference was that she had done it without him. Later that night, after returning to his penthouse, he found himself standing beside the same windows where everything had unraveled 5 years earlier. The city looked unchanged. The skyline remained beautiful. Yet the apartment felt larger now. Emptier. Ethan had dated occasionally after the divorce. Nothing serious. Nothing lasting. Every relationship seemed to fade before it truly began. First he blamed timing. Then chemistry. Eventually he stopped searching for explanations. Deep down he suspected the truth was simpler. Part of him had never moved on. His thoughts drifted toward the entryway table where he had once discovered the envelope Amara left behind. He still remembered opening it after she walked away. Still remembered reading every document. Adoption approval. Family evaluations. Plans she had spent months preparing. Plans she intended to share on their anniversary. Ethan closed his eyes. Even now the memory hurt. Not because she left. Because he finally understood what he had destroyed. The following week brought another surprise. His assistant entered his office carrying several event invitations requiring responses. Ethan signed most without reading them. Then one envelope caught his attention. The Whitmore Foundation Annual Gala. He almost declined automatically, until he noticed a note attached to the invitation, honoring community impact leaders including Amara Bennett. For several seconds he simply stared at the words. Fate had a strange sense of timing. Across the city, Amara stood in front of her bedroom mirror, while Lily sat on the edge of the bed offering enthusiastic fashion advice. The crimson gown flowed elegantly to the floor, reflecting warm evening light from the windows. 5 years ago the dress represented heartbreak. Tonight it represented something entirely different. Growth. Survival. Grace. Lily smiled proudly. I told you it was the right dress. Amara laughed softly. You were absolutely right. She adjusted a simple diamond bracelet before looking at her reflection one final time. The woman staring back no longer resembled the person who walked away carrying a single suitcase. She had earned every scar, every success, every lesson. And in less than 48 hours, two people whose lives had once been connected by love and loss were about to stand in the same room again. Neither of them knew it yet, but the most important conversation of their lives was finally approaching. The Whitmore Foundation Gala unfolded exactly as the city's elite expected. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom. A string orchestra filled the air with elegant music. Conversations drifted between business deals, charitable initiatives, and carefully polished success stories. Yet for Ethan Caldwell, none of it felt important. He stood near the edge of the room holding a glass he had barely touched, watching Amara from a distance. Every few minutes someone approached her. Executives, architects, philanthropists, industry leaders. They greeted her with admiration and genuine respect. Not because of who she had once been married to, because of who she had become. Ethan realized he had spent years measuring success through numbers, revenue, expansion, market influence. Amara had built something entirely different. She had built trust. The realization stung more than he expected. Across the ballroom, Amara accepted an award on behalf of her company. Her speech was brief, gracious, authentic. She thanked her team. She spoke about creating spaces where people felt welcome and valued. She spoke about community, belonging, and opportunity. Ethan listened carefully. Not once did she mention personal struggles. Not once did she describe what it had cost her to rebuild her life. That was the thing about true strength. It rarely announced itself. After the ceremony ended, guests gathered for dinner. Conversations resumed. The room relaxed. Ethan knew this might be his only chance. Before he could lose his nerve, he crossed the ballroom. Amara noticed him approaching. For a moment neither spoke. 5 years of memories stood quietly between them. "Congratulations," Ethan said. His voice sounded different than he remembered. Less certain. "Thank you," Amara replied. "You deserve all of this." A faint smile touched her lips. "That is kind of you to say." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Ethan glanced around the ballroom before returning his attention to her. "I read the article about your company." "Did you?" "Twice." Amara laughed softly. The sound carried none of the bitterness he feared. Somehow that made everything harder. Ethan looked down briefly before meeting her eyes again. "There is something I have wanted to say for a very long time." The warmth in her expression faded into quiet attentiveness. He took a slow breath. "I was wrong." The words felt heavier than any speech he had ever delivered. About many things. About what mattered. About what success meant. About us. Amara listened without interruption. Ethan continued. "For years I blamed pressure, expectations, business. But the truth is much simpler. I allowed other people's opinions to become more important than the person standing beside me." The orchestra shifted into another melody somewhere behind them. Ethan barely noticed. "I hurt someone who loved me when she had done nothing except support me. And I have regretted that every day since." For the first time that evening, emotion appeared in Amara's eyes. Not anger. Not sadness. Reflection. The kind that comes from revisiting a chapter long finished. "I know," she said quietly. Ethan blinked. "You know." "Yes." She offered a gentle smile. The regret was obvious even before tonight. Ethan looked away. There was no defense left. No argument. Only truth. After several moments, Amara spoke again. "The strange thing about pain is that eventually it stops being the center of your story." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Because deep down, he already knew where this conversation was heading. And for the first time in 5 years, he was afraid of hearing the answer.